Hello and welcome to this presentation of Robert McCloskey's Make Way for Ducklings. My name is Christina Rains and this presentation is for English 353. There is some important textual background for this particular work by McCloskey. Make Way for Ducklings was written and illustrated by Robert McCloskey in 1941 and was published in the United States. Make Way for Ducklings was the second book in the series and was by far the most popular. This book was written in 1941, which was the year the United States entered World War II, and therefore the reader can observe what the time period was like through the illustrations and language used. The historical time period for Make Way for Ducklings contributes not only to the artistic style of McCloskey, but also to the plot of the story. McCloskey's work was embraced by the Boston Society since it was set in the Boston Public Garden. McCloskey's work was actually so embraced that there was a memorial statue built within the Boston Public Garden for the book. Make Way for Ducklings represents how parents should care for their children and shows thoughtful searching for the best place to raise them. This positive example of parental care positively influenced society and taught them how to embrace family. The style of art focuses on realism and a slight cartoonish feel. This benefits the reader because the realism accurately portrays life in Boston, and the cartoon characteristics make it a childhood favorite. Make Way for Ducklings was beautifully illustrated and therefore won the Caldecott Medal in 1942. This contributes to its popularity as a children's picture book. The plot summary of Make Way for Ducklings is about Mr. and Mrs. Mallard who are looking for a great place to make a nest for their family. However, Mr. Mallard and Mrs. Mallard are very picky in where they want to find and make their nest. Mrs. Mallard finds that most places are too dangerous and therefore is quite delighted when they find that their home just outside the Boston Public Garden is perfect. They want to then move later when their children are a little bit older and able to encounter unexpected dangers safely to the Boston Public Garden to an island in the middle of the pond. While Mr. and Mrs. Mallard are exploring their new home, they soon find and meet a police officer named Michael who feeds them. After this, their 8 ducklings hatch and they learn to swim and dive. After they decide to move to the island in the center of the pond, and Mr. Mallard flies to the island to prepare their home. This leaves Mrs. Mallard with the task of taking the ducklings across town to their new home. But their adventure to their new home has some unexpected dangers, and Michael the police officer sees that the ducklings are in distress and stops traffic and even calls his fellow officers to assist them in their move to the public garden. Finally, the ducklings safely make it to their new home, and they are happily reunited with Mr. Mallard, and they enjoy their new home on the island of the Boston Public Garden. The style of art in Make Way for Ducklings is a classic for the time period. The art is a mixture of realism and has a slight cartoonish feel, which amplifies the reader's ability to see the real-life setting as well as to identify with the characters who are ducks. By portraying the ducks with some cartoonish elements, it gives the ducks human characteristics so that they become more alive to the reader. The original artwork done by McCloskey was a monochrome. Monochrome is an art technique in which the artist only uses one color to portray an entire scene. Below you can see the original ducklings and Mrs. Mallard in their original colors as well as in their original style. Mr. McCloskey's original work to Make Way for Ducklings was done in a sepia, which is a brown tone. McCloskey's illustrations were executed in charcoal and then lithographed on zinc plates. The lithograph process is one of printing from a flat surface to treated paper so that it repels ink from any other place on the artwork that it does not need to be in. This allows the art of the artist to have a realistic feel and a light feel in the strokes. However, most commonly today, Make Way for Ducklings is now only produced in black and white. The formal elements of this composition can contain focal points that focus on the distance and landscape. This allows the reader to fully experience how small ducks are in relation to Boston. In Make Way for Ducklings, the landscape is a prominent feature in most of the drawings, and this causes the reader's eye to be forced back into the picture, which allows them to feel serenity of the Boston Public Garden. It also has focal points that alert the reader of incoming dangers and artistically uses lines to bring a sense of urgency when danger is approaching. McCloskey frames his art by allowing the ducks to look small in relationship to the impeding threats and land masses. In this illustration here, the reader sees how small the ducks are in comparison to the landscape, giving the readers an idea what it might be like to be a duck. On the other hand, it is interesting to note that McCloskey's art also generally starts with the ducks on the left side of the page, which allows the reader to be drawn from the left side of the page to the right side of the page, which is the general way the eye moves across the page while reading. This allows the reader to maintain the flow of the text and illustrations. Some other formal elements that can be found throughout this work is the use of soft curving lines and soft shapes. This gives the reader a sense of peace and serenity. However, it is interesting to note that objects of danger are usually portrayed with lines and shapes that are usually sharper and very bold. The reader will often note that there is not much extra space in this work, but that there is an array of buildings and landscape where McCloskey could have left open space. It is suggested that McCloskey did not leave much open space in order to portray elements of realism, since he used a real city as his setting. McCloskey did not use much texture in his illustrations. However, one texture that he uses continuously is that of shading. By shading, McCloskey was able to show readers the aspect of his art that are shadowed or dense, or in the photo here of the artwork, you can see that impending danger is also dark, and that the bicycle has very dark shapes and is shadowed. McCloskey uses two perspectives in his illustrations. The first is the bird's eye view, so that the reader can see a whole, and it's important, as well as a close-up, which allows the reader to identify with the more cartoonish-like illustrations and drama unfolding. Again, in the picture here, we can see the ducks that look more cartoonish than in the other pieces of art, but it helps the reader to identify with the ducks and see what is going on. The colors used in Make Way for Ducklings is a sepia, and this is a brown. This eliminates unnecessary distractions that would otherwise be overwhelming with too much color in the realistic piece of art. Rhythm and movement are crucial for a child's picture book. One notable aspect of this book is the thin and somewhat big size for a child's hands. This encourages an adult reader to help a younger child read it. The separation of text and illustrations is important to this work, and it is noted that the illustrations are given the bulk of the page space. This suggests that illustrations are important in telling the story to the children and allows them to engage in the story. McCloskey also uses repetition of images, including ducks, ponds, landscape, and police officers. This allows the reader to find rhythm while they're reading and overlooking the illustrations. This also allows the text and the illustration to be seamlessly woven together. An important aspect of picture books is their vocabulary. In Make Way for Ducklings, the reader continuously encounters rhyming with the ducklings' names that all rhyme with quack. They also discover Boston Park's geography and a few common but very unfamiliar vocabulary words for children of this age group. This makes an exciting encounter with adults and also helps the child to learn new vocabulary. A textual analysis of Make Way for Ducklings finds that characterization of animals is slightly anthropomorphized in this text. The ducks are seen as talking and caring for their young like responsible adults. However, they are not so anthropomorphized that they identify as equal with humans. This contrast can be seen as ducks talk to each other, but humans only hear it as quack. Some of the themes that are portrayed in this work are the theme of parental love and care, and is displayed in the Mallards' desire for safety for their children. The reader also discovers that the theme of this book is not didactic, since the ducks and their parents do not learn any moral lesson. However, the reader does discover that the ducks find a hero in someone who is unlikely. The text states, "He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop traffic, and then beckoned with the other, as policemen do, for Mrs. Mallard to come over." The reader discovers an unlikely hero in Michael the police officer. This book, Make Way for Ducklings, is a wonderful example of a well-written picture book and is beloved by many to this day. Thank you for taking the time to view this presentation. Please overview the Works Cited page and further information on the text that are included in this presentation. Thank you.